And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome aboard. I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Tuesday, August 13th, 2024. And starting with the sea ice, the melting continues here across the Beaufort Sea coastline. And we have open water along the Chukchi Sea coast. We've had some stronger winds the past day and a half or so, creating high surf, especially vicinity of Kivalina all the way up to along Point Lay. And that should continue into at least 10 a.m. Wednesday morning, where there is a high surf advisory in effect. And then as we go through the midweek, late Wednesday night and especially Thursday and Friday, a stronger low is going to come up out of the Bering Sea and impact areas of the west coast, extending from up here in the northwest coast all the way down into, say, Kuskokwim and Bristol Bays. With gale force winds, there could even be a few gusts upwards of storm force, along with some higher surf and areas of moderate to heavy rain. So on the weather map late tonight, early on Wednesday morning, here's that weather maker that's going to be crossing the central Aleutians on Wednesday afternoon. Meanwhile, ridge of high pressure origins down in the North Pacific, with the ridge extending now, building northward through the Gulf and up into the central interior, will provide more in the way of sunshine, warmer temperatures, south central, central, and eastern mainland. Panhandle still maybe a few light showers, intercoastal mountains and northern portions, but this ridge will be nudging over to the east here for Thursday and Friday, which will also give the Panhandle some lighter winds and a little more sunshine and warmer temperatures. But this low will cross the central Aleutians Wednesday afternoon. The front to the north just kind of washes out, and then come Thursday, the system occludes. The low will be located just to the west and northwest of Nunavik Island around mid to late afternoon, and then it'll make landfall heading northeastward between Nome and Golovin up here in the south shore of the Seward Peninsula. And with it, it will have some strong gusty winds, areas of moderate to heavy rainfall, and again, some higher surf along the west and southwest coast, especially like into places like Kuskokwim Bay. So looking at the marine forecast for Wednesday for the Panhandle, south winds 15 knots, Lynn Canal waves 2-3 feet, variable winds around 10 knots with waves a foot or two in Petersburg there in the Stevens Passage, and then northwest winds 10 knots, 2 to 3 foot waves Dixon Entrance for the outer coast. Winds northwest 15 to 20 knots south of Sitka off of Craig, swells 5 feet. Westerly winds between off of Sitka up to Gustavus 10 to 15 knots, and then just light variable 5-knot winds with swells just a few feet there outside of Yakutat Bay and Cape Suckling. For Thursday, the inner channel winds will be more north to northwest, 10 to 15 knots. Waves generally running a couple feet, maybe as high as 3 feet in Dixon Entrance. Otherwise, the outer coast within 15 nautical miles of shore, we're looking at 15 to 20 knot, mainly northwest winds with swells right around 5-6 feet. For the northwestern Gulf outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance and off the Kenai coast, variable winds only around 10 knots, swells a few feet. Southeast winds to 10 knots within Prince William Sound with a couple of foot waves there. Variable winds upper Cook Inlet at 10 knots, and then kind of a mix of either west or southerly winds off of Anchor Point down to the entrance of Cook Inlet with waves running couple of few feet. And for Thursday, we still have variable winds continue outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance toward Kayak Island. Southeast winds still 10 knots there with a couple of foot waves within that wider expanse of Prince William Sound. South winds to 10 knots as we go in the upper Cook Inlet, but look for east to southeast winds, and the strongest winds southeasterly to 30 knots there at the entrance of Cook Inlet with swells of 7 to 8 feet. For Wednesday, across Kodiak Island, southwest winds of 15 knots, but as we trail out down along the Alaska Peninsula, winds are going to become more southeasterly around 20 knots. And then on Thursday, as that low pressure is going to be just on the west and north side of Nunavik Island, we do have some gale force winds here within Bristol Bay and north of Cold Bay. Southeast to south winds, waves 4 to 5 feet. And then for the North Pacific side, southeast to south winds at 30 knots with swells 7 to 10 feet. And across the Aleutians, Wednesday afternoon, we're going to find the center of low pressure passing there right to the northwest of Adak. Ahead of it, generally southeast winds to 30 knots. On the backside of it, winds are northerly to 25 knots, Kiska to Shimia. And then for Thursday, in the wake of the system, Look for south-southwest gales to 35 knots, far eastern Aleutians around Unalaska, becoming southwest to west through the middle Aleutians 20 to 25 knots, falling back off to west-southwest 15 knots west of Adak. And along the southwest coast, 10-knot south winds into Bristol Bay, south winds of 15 knots into Kuskokwim Bay, as well as along the lower Yukon coast and out towards St. Matthew, turning southwest 15 to 20 knots offshore there at Hemonic into the Norton Sound with swells of 4 to 5 feet. But then Thursday, that low center will be taking a track just to the north and west of Nunavik Island, heading up toward Nome, Golovin here, the south shore of the Seward Peninsula. So in this region, with the passage of the occluded front, look for southeast to south winds. They'll eventually swing southwesterly back toward the Pribilofs, but we're looking at 35 to 40 knot gales within Bristol Bay and Kuskokwim Bay, and that's what could lead to that high surf, potentially even a little minor coastal flooding. You're going to have heavier rainfall along all of the southwest and west coast, pushing into the interior. Ahead of the low, winds will be east-southeast out of Norton Sound, the lower Yukon Delta at 25 to 30 knots. And then on Wednesday, we're looking for winds to be generally southwesterly through the Bering Strait, south-southwest at 20 to 25 knots, swells 4 to 6 feet. And then as we get up to Point Hope on up to Utqiagvik, southwest winds around 15 knots with waves 3-4 feet, and generally southwest winds Utqiagvik to Prudhoe Bay, 15 to 20 knots, becoming a little more westerly in the vicinity of Kaktovik at 10 knots. And on Thursday, only 5-knot winds, waves only around a foot there at Kaktovik, but southwest winds 10 to 15 knots, getting out from Prudhoe Bay down through Utqiagvik and Wainwright. Those winds are going to turn around offshore to the east, though, off of Point Lay and off of Cape Lisburne, Point Hope, Kivalina at 10 to 20 knots. As we pass through the Bering Strait, though, winds increase again. We're expecting northeasterly winds 25 to 30 knots through the Bering Strait on the west side of the Seward Peninsula and the north side of St. Lawrence Island with swells of 5 to 6 feet.